Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06. It's Monday morning. Happy Columbus Day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We got a good slate ahead of us here as we wait our way through a busy weekend. At 7:05, Joe DeGeneva will be here. 7:35 will be a recap by Trevor Maddich of the Commanders' near miss in Baltimore, but maybe a preview of a Super Bowl matchup. 8:05 brings us Charlie Spearing, journalist and author of Amateur Hour. Talk about the latest political news for 2024. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie, a good weekend I hope you had?
Very good weekend. Good morning.
Was that like a German split infinitive? What did I just do? A good weekend I hope you had.
Thank you, Yoda.
Yeah, exactly. I want you to, Julie, send I don't know. All right. Well, it was a great weekend. There's a lot to talk about and catch up on this weekend, and obviously with politics and all that stuff. But can I just start with Elon Musk and his SpaceX program? We kind of geek out about space here now and again when there's a launch, and it's a big deal. And a lot of people in this area work with either directly with the space program or with contractors and peripheral organizations that are connected to the space program. Well, in fact, in your own home, you have connections there.
Yes.
With NASA and the space program, if I remember right.
Yes.
Julie. So what we saw, I feel like what Elon Musk and SpaceX just accomplished over the weekend is one of those moments where, like 100 years from now, people look back and say, oh, yeah, that was the moment where everything changed. Mm-hmm. And it didn't get a whole lot of attention, of course, because Elon Musk supports Donald Trump. I mean, that's literally where we are right now.
Right.
State of California just announced that they have precluded SpaceX from doing certain launches of his Starlink satellite system from any coastal California launch platform. And the politicians noted his statements on X and on Twitter as reasons why they don't want him to use launch pads in California. It's outrageous. This guy could literally cure cancer.
But
they'd say, no, we don't want that medication anywhere.
But they'll call on him when they need help, when there's a natural disaster and they need Starlink, or when astronauts are stuck up in the sky. Yeah, they'll call on him, but they don't really. They like to make life more difficult for him.
Yeah, those two examples Julie gave literally over the course of the last 2 weeks is exactly what they did. With this, so let me explain what the achievement is that we had here. Everybody knows how our space program has worked up until now, and how it worked with the space shuttle, first, with the original rocket launches where you'd have your giant rocket and basically they were giant boosters that the capsule would sit on. You'd basically just imagine being an astronaut for the Gemini program or the Apollo program, and you're literally just sitting on a nuclear bomb, that blows up underneath you to lift you off into space. And then with the space shuttle, we had the giant fuel tank with the two solid booster rockets, those things would fall off, at the initial part of the launch, and then the gas tank the fuel tank would also dispatch. They could reuse the fuel tank, if I remember right, and they would go and recover that from the water when it splashed down. But for the most part, those boosters, whatever boosted the vehicle up into space, was basically the second you launched it, it was pretty much gone, right?
Yep.
Elon Musk's vision was SpaceX. If he eventually wants to colonize Mars, and he said the only way we do that is if we can reuse this stuff. And he's been working for over a decade now with technologies and AI technology, as well as sort of utilizing the same technology he uses in his Tesla cars to be able to map and direct cars, and they can sort of be self-driving. He's been working on getting those booster rockets to be able to blast off, spend 5 minutes launching through the Earth's atmosphere, and then after just breaking, through the atmosphere and getting the capsule up out into space, that booster then returns through the atmosphere and literally lands on a platform right there where you took off. And the idea is, it takes 5 minutes to get out into space. Then the booster comes back down, lands right where it started, and then an hour later, it's ready to go again. That's the vision. Think about that for a minute.
Yes, I know.
Considering, for the last 50 years of the 60, 70 years in our space program since the mid-50s, what we've had to do to get those rockets built and ready to launch, that one little capsule. And now, if he's able to achieve this, we can launch a second capsule out into space an hour after we just launched another one.
Yeah.
And imagine if he has 100 of those.
Yeah.
Right? Where literally every 5 minutes you're launching another thing out into space and another thing out of space. And then the rocket comes back and you fill it up with fuel again. And then it goes out and it lands right on the platform. And Saturday, that's exactly what happened. For the first time in history, this giant, and it's huge, it's this booster rocket, launched from its platform, cleared Earth's atmosphere at the first reaches of space, and then it returned to the atmosphere and then landed. The tower, the arms on the tower that hold the booster, actually caught it as it was landing on the platform.
It was,
and then just lowered it safely onto the platform.
If you have not seen the video, to those listening, honestly, I got to say, my husband is a total space geek.
Yes.
My kids are space geeks. I am not. Much
Really?
like it's.
I'm suspicious of any guy who isn't a space geek.
Okay,
honestly.
but
I'm guessing Tim Walz is not a space geek.
Probably not. And it's similar to my love of sports. But I will tell you, I watched that video and I got welled up.
Yeah.
It was so incredible to watch it. And if you can find one of the videos, there's one with Elon Musk's brother, who he's standing with people and they just go wild. It's so fun to listen to people's reactions. Yeah. But I will tell you, it was chilling. It was goosebump making. So I really, I can't tell you how. And I felt like we are so close to Gattaca, that movie where people are getting on rockets and going to Mars and like street, or business attire. I feel like space travel is about to become routine.
It is insane. And and Elon Musk has this vision, and then he has the means to be able to make it happen, and he makes it happen. And then, by the way, it's also a great business model and ends up being quite profitable. Tesla is, I think, the most profitable auto manufacturer on the planet today. And at the time, he was laughed at.
He is absolutely hated by the left. The left's main religion is climate change, and this is another effort by him to reduce some of the space trash that is up there. So this is another area in which he's improving. It's sort of on a green agenda, and yet he's still hated.
Right, exactly. That's the thing. If you're really an environment, I do own 2 Teslas, actually. They're great cars. It had nothing to do with environmentalism.
But you
in any
burn
way
a tire
whatsoever.
In your backyard nightly.
That is correct. I burn as many carbon emissions as I can when I go back. In fact, I've now, instead of burning tires, I've been collecting the baby bunny rabbits because they're carbon as well.
Excellent.
And I just kill the rabbits and burn them. I'm kidding. No rabbits were harmed in this opening segment of this program. So, a California State Commission this week rejected the U.S. Space Force's bid to increase this. And by the way, this was a government. The Space Force is working with SpaceX. And the state of California said, no, you can't, to increase the number of SpaceX rocket launches on the state's central coast, citing concerns about the environmental impact of the launches.
Gosh.
But the Coastal Commission actually revealed, a couple of them unnamed, in the 6-4 vote. The California Coastal Commission denied this, pointing to its previous request for the military and SpaceX to mitigate the disruptive sonic booms caused by the rockets, keep a closer eye on the operation's effect on the state's wildlife. It's all BS. They actually revealed that part of the reason why they did that is Elon Musk's politics.
Of course.
California officials cite Elon Musk's politics in rejecting SpaceX launches. Elon Musk, by the way, just posted yesterday that this is incredibly inappropriate. What I post on this platform has nothing to do with a coastal commission in California. I am filing suit against them on Monday for violating the First Amendment. That's the only way. And again, Elon has the deep pockets to be able to sue these absolute authoritarians. But I try not to gush about Musk because he's a flawed guy, and I'm not putting all my eggs in one individual's basket in any way whatsoever. But this could very well. You talk about one giant leap for mankind.
I love him. Just
okay, fine. We're big fans of Elon here, and he's on the right side of politics all of a sudden. Isn't that nice? 5:15 WMAL traffic and weather.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
By the way, yesterday morning, Musk also tweeted out about this California State Commission prohibiting SpaceX launches. He said, Trump must win or this will get even more insane than you can imagine. So
Smart guy.
Trump. All right, so you've seen this video. Trump just played it, I think, yesterday at the Arizona rally that he did. But there's been a couple of other rallies where he's played it. It's a mashup of scenes from the opening portions of Full Metal Jacket, where the very famous drill sergeant is like screaming at all of the actors there in boot camp for the Marine Corps, right? Yeah. And then he juxtaposes that with images of the drag queens in the military, that are part of the new recruiting strategy for the Pentagon, and various other woke aspects of the military, mostly focused around LGBTQ stuff. And then the message is, listen, our military needs to be tough guys who can beat up and kill the bad guy, period, and not being inclusive to drag queens and promoting that as the new face of the military maybe isn't sending the right message to the whole score of young men who would love to join this operation.
And maybe this is one of the reasons we have a morale problem and we have a recruiting problem.
Yes, exactly. So people have been screaming, how dare you use scenes from Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, Full Metal Jacket, in some way to promote Trump. That's an anti-war, pro-peace movie. It's mocking the military in many respects, or at least portions of the military's decision-making power during the Vietnam War. And there's no way Stanley Kubrick would be a Trump supporter. You shouldn't use that video. Because we hear this all the time. You use a Rolling Stones song and everyone screams, oh, don't use my music at your rallies, even though the Rolling Stones are getting paid huge royalties for using the music at the rallies. Right? Well, something amazing happened last night. Vivian Kubrick, the daughter of Stanley Kubrick, and this isn't just some disconnected daughter of the late genius film director. Vivian Kubrick was actually, she wrote the film score to Full Metal Jacket. Yes. She was involved in her father's films. She just did an amazing documentary about the making of The Shining. She knows her dad.
Yes.
She put out a very long post saying, I understand people are complaining about using Full Metal Jacket footage, but and she says, I'm sure the irony of using Full Metal Jacket footage is not lost on Trump or his team. Trump is always seeking to end wars and use peaceful methods. However, that's primarily what Full Metal Jacket is about, the shocking and complicated paradoxes of human nature. And then he said, truthfully, I believe my father, who supported Reagan, would very much approve of saving America, indeed the world, from the highly destructive globalist forces threatening to take over the planet. And if that footage from Full Metal Jacket helps Trump make the point that the U.S. military needs properly trained, super tough, focused, dedicated warriors and not introduce the demoralizing effects of wokeism and attracting people to join up simply to have their sexual reassignments paid for, then Trump has my blessing.
Wow.
Finally, knowing my father very well, I can assure you he had a profound grasp of how paradoxical human nature is, which accounts for how at the same time he made anti-war films, he had a great passion for guns, self-defense, not hunting, and he had quite a few. My father had great respect for life. His movies bring unimpeachable evidence of his love for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So on that basis, I feel very confident he would be a Trump supporter and would forgive using Full Metal Jacket incongruously if that helps the cause of freedom. I am blown away by this.
Me too.
I am absolutely blown away.
I mean, Kubrick is Hollywood royalty.
100%.
Vivian is obviously sort of the lookout for his legacy. And is deeply involved with work to protect that legacy, and for her to say unequivocally,
there's no gray area here.
There's no gray area. This isn't one of these never Trump sort of mealy mouthed,
on the one hand and on the other hand,
yes. But that said,
the greater threat,
yes, the greater, none of that. This is just very clearly written to show not only that he has the right to use this and that they approve, but support for Trump. This was brilliant and beautifully written.
Beautifully written because the people who are like decrying this ad because they're just so blinded by their allegiance to the LGBTQIA agenda and wokeism in general, or just hate Trump, she's pointing out that they're missing the point. The whole point here, and by the way, the whole point of Full Metal Jacket, it's not just black and white, it's anti-war, anti-military. No, Full Metal Jacket is actually very pro-strong military and men who are trained to do the job of protecting freedom and killing the enemy, being allowed to do just that. The whole point of the Vietnam War is that those guys weren't allowed to do their job and that the mealy-mouthed politicians got in the way of it. And if you actually have a strong defense and strong military able to do what they're trained to do, then you actually have a safer world. And that's the whole point of this ad. It's the whole point of highlighting Full Metal Jacket and the need for a strong military and the deterrent effect of having it. It keeps us from being weak, and it saves the world. I just, everything about this. What is going on in our world right now, Julie Gunlock?
Yeah,
there is a shift happening.
There is. People are tired of it. People are ready for America to come back.
Even Stanley Kubrick's daughter. And I hope all those idiots in Hollywood see this and just have to figure it out. It's 5:23.
Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:37. O'Connor and Company, thanks for tuning in here. Coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGenova. 7:35, Trevor Maddich on the Commanders' near miss in Baltimore. And at the 8:05 time, we'll have Charlie Spearing talk about the presidential election. Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie, J.D. Vance had himself a weekend.
Oh, boy, did he ever.
You know, while Tim Walz is out there dressing like Elmer Fudd and struggling to load a $2,000 Beretta shotgun.
It's so perfect.
Meredith is the gun nut in my family. And by nut, I don't mean like crazy. I mean like she loves guns. She loves and a beautiful firearm she loves. And she saw J.D. Vance struggling with this Beretta.
Meredith has that great photo.
With her shotgun, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great shot. Used to be a Twitter profile picture. She saw J.D. Vance struggling with his shotgun. Tim Walz, excuse me. Tim Walz, but, putting the butt of the shotgun against his groin, it looked like, while he was struggling to load it. And she was like...
And then he complained about the kick.
Yes.
It hurts my shoulder. Well, then don't put it in your crotch, okay? Because that could be very bad.
Less harm can be done there, I think. But Meredith looks at that. Meredith's like, it's like, this hurts my heart to see this buffoon with this gun. Could I please have that gun? I could use that gun. Anyway, while Tim Walz is doing that, J.D. Vance is out on the circuit doing what he always does, which is just exposing left-wing liberal media personalities. I don't even want to call them journalists. They're media personalities as the buffoons that they are. This time it was Martha Raddatz on ABC News. I don't think they're going to keep inviting him on the Sunday shows if this continues.
Boy, they really are. They really look stupid when he comes on.
Let me start where this all began. We've seen the story out of Colorado where Venezuelan gangs have commandeered apartment complexes. When this first happened and the security footage was shown, Fox News showed it, Right of Center websites talked about it, we talked about it a couple of times here, and the governor of Colorado said, well, that's not happening, that's a lie, that's fake news. And then within 24 hours he said, it is happening and we've got a handle on it though, and so there's nothing to worry about, we'll take care of it. Well, it continues. And a former apartment resident, Cindy Romero, joined Trump on stage at a rally on Friday.
This isn't just affecting me. This is affecting all of you as well. We've got to get Trump back in office. We've got to get it done. With Trump's help, we can take this state back over. We can make a difference. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. For believing me. Thank you.
Now, that's Cindy Romero telling the story about what happened in her apartment building when these gangs took over. And what they did, they take over the building and then they start taking the rent from people. They start taking the money. They just basically said, I'm the captain now. I'm captain now.
Yes.
And that last part, thank you for believing me. Because everyone said these people who were dealing with this were lying, right?
Yes.
Because they're racist and it's Springfield, Ohio all over again and all that. All right, so fast forward. There's so much to this story, and this is going to take us 2 segments to get through because you need to get all the facts. Fast forward to Sunday morning. Martha Raddatz sitting in for George Stephanopoulos on This Week on ABC News, interviewing J.D. Vance. She raises the issue, but I want you to hear how the exchange goes, and then we'll jump in.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
I do love that Martha Raddatz. Okay, now that you've made your point and made me look like an idiot, can we move on to the next question
move
now?
on.
You're
Yes,
always trying to interrupt on these things.
It was the Dana Bash strategy there.
But understand, that was brilliant from J.D. Vance, especially this part.
Police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment
The voice breaking like Peter Brady.
Yes, exactly.
You hear yourself.
Yes.
It was only a handful of apartment complexes that were taken over by violent Venezuelan thugs. They'll get over it.
Yeah,
So-
one thing that I loved, I know you're going to get to this though, is somebody posted the picture of Martha Raddatz's mansion in Arlington. This woman doesn't have to worry about any of this. And also, can we just
wait
take
a minute.
moment?
She might she might have to worry about this because when you let apartment complexes get taken over by Venezuelan gangs and you make excuses for it and say it's not that big a deal, her home will be next. See, when it is her home, or when it's her mother's home, or her children's home, or her brother or sister's home,
When it becomes personal, that's
she would
the
have a
only
different
time,
tone of
yes.
voice
That's
when
the only time
addressing
these
J.D.
leftists
Vance.
care is when it becomes personal. But I will say, the other thing that cracked me up is she says it's only a handful of ... apartment complexes.
Right.
Okay, so think of this is multiple, possibly thousands of people that are affected because of multiple complexes.
Right. Each complex is probably
has how many
hundreds of apartments.
Yes.
So it's only a
insane.
couple thousand citizens who have now been terrorized and continue to be terrorized. Not to mention,
No, but you're right. The voice crack coupled with the "what in the world is wrong with you" kind of outrage from J.D. Vance was perfect.
All right. So more on Martha Raddatz's hypocrisy and why she asked this question in the first place and how it bit her in the butt. But also, the owners of several of these apartment complexes have gone on the record now to tell the truth. And we want to share the truth about what's really going on in Colorado. It continues to go on in just a moment. It's 5:44.
WMAL, making sense of the roads because traffic doesn't always follow the pattern. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs.
Yeah, she doesn't hear herself, actually. And you're right, $2.1 million home in Alexandria. Beautiful home, by the way. Someone posted a picture of it, which I would say that's inappropriate, except for the fact that they have exposed the privacy of J.D. Vance and his Alexandria home. So I guess, Goose and Gander should get along here. Mm-hmm. If her mother lived in that apartment complex, I think Martha Raddatz would take a different approach. And maybe when a journalist presents a political issue like that, she should consider, actually, that this probably goes well beyond the friendly confines of her own cloistered experience in Alexandria. But also this, and I wish that this had gotten more attention. How often has ABC News discussed the situation in Aurora, Colorado, and these apartment complexes? How many times did Martha Raddatz or any of her colleagues ever discuss this issue and the very real ramifications of the open border policy? The only time she raised it was to raise it in a political context to try to go after Donald Trump for talking about the issue in a way that Martha Raddatz didn't approve of. And if that's what it takes to get people to recognize what's going on here, then that's the reason why Donald Trump talks about these things at rallies in ways that Martha Raddatz doesn't like.
Well, Larry, we saw this with Springfield, Ohio. That the only time the media focused on immigrants, these illegal immigrants flooding these sort of mid-sized communities and fundamentally changing them and making them more dangerous.
Yes.
And it's not just Springfield, Ohio. We've seen this all over the country. The only time the media focused on this was to criticize Donald Trump and what they called his exaggerations about eating cats and dogs.
Right.
Which was coming from people in those communities. Vance and Trump were simply repeating what residents had said at city council meetings.
Yeah.
But you're right. The only time these issues ever get attention is when Trump brings them up, and then the media criticizes Trump and therefore sheds some light on these issues.
And the way J.D. Vance responded to this, I think, actually, of course, it boomerangs on them. And,
Yes.
it's like every time they think that they've got this gotcha moment that's
Right.
this is unforgivable, and there's no way Donald Trump will win after this, and we're going to expose it now. It actually ends up helping Trump, which is a pretty amazing turn of events as well. Meanwhile, what's really happening in Colorado? Well, a company called CBZ Management of Aurora, Colorado, put out a very long post detailing exactly what the truth is. It says, we started managing these buildings when new owners acquired the Colorado properties in 2019. At the time, the properties were in poor condition, and our mission was to renovate them, thereby increasing their value. An ambitious project, to say the least. After some time, we noticed a rise in crime and tenant complaints. The most alarming moment occurred when our local CBZ representative was attacked at the end of 2023. He had gone to inspect a recently vacated 3-bedroom apartment, a rare occurrence for such a large unit, and he found people squatting in there.
Yes.
Illegal immigrants who had just taken over.
Group of men.
And
a
they
group of men
they
were
attacked
squatting.
him. There's a picture of him, by the way, with blood all over his face and all over his shirt. After the attack on our CBZ representative, we began getting threatening text messages. We also frequently found people illegally occupying new vacated apartments during scheduled tours. This was initially attributed to an influx of migrants exploiting squatter laws. When confronted, many of these illegal tenants and squatters claimed they had already paid rent, which we soon realized was true, but not to us. They were paying rent to a different entity. These would be the gangs who
Yes.
had commandeered these buildings.
Yes.
CBZ management continues. This is all a post on the X platform. Once we fully understood what we and our tenants were facing, we expected a swift response, with the city offering meaningful resources and police protection, perhaps even from the National Guard, to help us regain control of our properties. That never happened. Instead, they go on to say, instead, we were told that we were making this up and exaggerating it.
Yes.
The media, it includes clips of local media who sort of parrot the local city government's position on this, and as if it were true, without actually.
These were elected officials that were like,
Yes.
this is not a problem. You're making this up.
Finally, one city councilwoman decided to take action after one of our last remaining legitimate tenants, Cindy Romero, that's who you heard at the Trump rally, reached out to her in desperation. Luckily, Cindy had her own cameras. Most of ours had been destroyed by the gangs, and provided video proof. Despite clear evidence, many still deny the reality of the situation, sometimes using us as scapegoats. That's why we are no longer staying silent. We will continue to counter falsehoods with simple facts and evidence. Yes, gangs did take control of our apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, and the government did nothing. That is the real story. Martha Raddatz, where are you? Where's ABC News? All they can do is talk about this in the context
absolutely right.
of
You are
Donald Trump.
You are absolutely right. And the mayor of Aurora, Colorado, and many other government officials in that city were embarrassed. They were embarrassed that they had not really addressed this issue, and so they lied. And they covered this up. And then Martha Raddatz did exactly what they wanted her to do, which is repeat the lies, repeat the cover up.
Yep.
And thank God for J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
His outrage was exactly what was needed at that moment.
The only thing Martha Raddatz was reduced to was
A handful of problems.
it's just a handful of problems. Please show me anything more elitist and more out of touch and more beneficial, by the way, to the momentum that this election is gaining right now. By the way, speaking of that, Donald Trump officially received the unanimous endorsement from the Border Patrol Union this weekend. It's 5:53.